Thank you, Dr. Karagama. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Under the project Meeting the Development Challenges of Migration, or the MEDMIC project, one of the three studies that was undertaken focused on the topic of accessing new employment markets abroad. And today's presentation is based on the preliminary findings from this study. The outline for today's presentation is as follows. First of all, I'll provide a brief background to the study and then go on to state the research questions. Second, I'll outline the methodology that was used for this particular study. And third, the initial findings that we found from the interviews that we conducted with the agents. And the fourth, the policy implications which stems from the findings. And I'll wrap up by stating some of the limitations of the study and the future research direction this particular study can take forward. As most of you are aware, and as was highlighted in the inaugural session, Middle East constitutes an important employment market for Sri Lanka. In fact, over 93% of Sri Lankan workers are employed in this region. And until recently, many of the migrants were females and they worked as housemaids. However, there are significant costs associated with women and wives leaving their homes and seeking employment abroad. In comparison, the proportion of skilled and semi-skilled workers from Sri Lanka is comparatively small. And it is in this context that the government has been promoting the diversification. It is in this context that the government has been promoting the diversification of markets and job categories over the years. Given this background, the study proposes two research questions. The first is, what are the perceived potential new employment markets and occupations that are available for Sri Lankan migrants in the near future, that is in next 4 to 5 years. And the second question is, what are the perceived challenges that Sri Lanka faces when attempting to access new markets abroad? In terms of methodology that was used for this particular study, we used a qualitative method. Due to the nature of the information required in answering the research questions. As explained in the previous slide, we are interested in knowing the potential, what are the new markets, what sort of job categories will be available, and what sort of challenges that they would face in accessing them. Obviously, these sort of questions require both description and explanation, and for this reason, a qualitative method was best suited in answering the research question. The study uses both primary and secondary data. Primary data was gathered through semi-structured interviews, face-to-face interviews with the relevant stakeholders in the industry, which included licensed foreign employment agencies, a private association, and a government institution. Agents were primarily selected because they form an important link between employees abroad and migrants in Sri Lanka, and thus they would have an in-depth knowledge of the issues that migrants face in accessing markets abroad. Altogether, 24 interviews were conducted, and for this purpose, a questionnaire was developed. In the selection of respondents, we used purposive sampling and more specifically used maximum likelihood variation in order to obtain a variety of responses. And of the agents that were interviewed, 15 were small, that is they sent 500 or fewer migrants each year. 2 were medium in scale, they sent between 500 and 1,000 migrants a year, and 5 were large agents, sending more than 1,000 migrants a year. Interviews were conducted with people who held positions within the agencies, namely there were assistant managers, chairman, and so forth. And the recruitment agencies that were interviewed, they have been in business they have been in business basically either from 3 years, as little as 3 years to 34 years. They have been in business between as little as 3 to 40 years. And the number of employees that they hired ranged from 3 to 34. Predominantly, their business was in the Middle East, and they specialize in all job categories from housemaids to professionals. The primary data was supplemented with the use of secondary data, which was obtained from the Sri Lanka Bureau of Foreign Employment Annual Statistical Handbook, and this was supplemented with by referring to publications and policy documents. In terms of analyzing the findings, what we did was we obviously audio recorded the interviews and with permission, and then transcribed the interviews, and thereafter coded the interviews into themes and sub-themes, and then tabulated the data for the write-up. In terms of initial findings, what we found out was that the regions that have opened in the past 2 to 3 years, vast majority of them were in the Middle East. In fact, 16 out of 22 respondents said that Middle East has opened up in the recent past. And within the Middle East, Qatar provided most of the opportunities, especially in the construction sector, both in low skill occupation like construction workers, as well as more highly skilled categories like engineers and architects. Another industry which has opened up in Qatar has been in the hospitality industry, as well as in the retail sector. The opening up the market in Qatar has been attributed to the hosting of the FIFA World Cup in year 2022. Another market which has opened up for Sri Lankan has been the UAE and Saudi Arabia, but in the case of Saudi Arabia, this has been confined to housemaids. Other than that, the interview agents mentioned South Korea as markets that have opened up for Sri Lankan migrants, Malaysia, and Australia. Going into the future, although it's difficult to predict what the future holds in terms of jobs and markets that will be opening up, vast majority of the interviews with the agents said that Qatar will continue to be an important market for Sri Lanka, again in construction work due to the development of infrastructure works in that country. And again, Saudi Arabia and UAE came up as other markets which are likely to be important for Sri Lanka. Again, Malaysia turned up as another market for Sri Lankan migrants in the future, Australia and Libya. Going on to the question of what sort of challenges Sri Lanka would face in accessing markets, the agents highlighted 17 issues in accessing markets abroad. However, due to time constraint, I'll be looking at only the top 10 of them. So the first challenge in terms of accessing markets abroad is language proficiency. This was said to be problematic, and it affected recruitment of across all job categories, from low skill to high skill work. To overcome this barrier, the agents suggested that there should be more effective language training programs, specifically focusing on spoken English. They highlighted the fact that there should be more emphasis given to the spoken aspect of the language. They also suggested that establishing English language training centers outside of Colombo so that it can cater to people outside of the urban areas. The second issue that agents said was a challenge in terms of accessing markets abroad was the rules and regulations in recruitment of migrant workers. Whilst they acknowledge the importance of having rules and regulations to ensure the safety and welfare of workers and their families, they stated that some of the rules and regulations are unnecessary or even redundant. They specifically mentioned the issue of training, mandatory training for higher skilled categories, which they considered was redundant because they really didn't need this sort of training. In this context, agents call for minimization of rules imposed on them so that they can send more workers abroad, as well as the training that is required to be much more specific to the professions of the migrant workers, rather than just having generic training programs, that they should be much more specific to the needs of the migrant who are going for that particular job abroad. Needs of the migrant who are going for that particular job abroad. The third challenge was limited job orders outside of traditional markets. Currently, the agents have little or no contact outside the Middle East, and thus they have difficulty in verifying the job orders that they get, whether they are legitimate and genuine. And in this regard, they ask for assistance in terms of identifying genuine recruitment agencies and job orders from Sri Lankan embassies outside the Middle East, where there are no labor officers. The fourth challenge was salaries. This was an issue that they flagged. They said that currently the salaries on offer for particular categories like the low-skilled work is unattractive, and they said that you could earn the same amount working here in Sri Lanka, so there's no incentive for people to go abroad. As a solution to this problem, they mentioned that the need for higher salary or negotiation of a minimum salary or a higher wage, so that there will be an incentive for people to go abroad. The fifth issue that they mentioned was with regard to preferences. They said that Sri Lankans are quite reluctant to go to certain markets, especially in the Middle East, certain countries, even though there are jobs available in those markets, largely due to the negative publicity regarding these markets in the local media, fairly or unfairly, and also certain restrictions placed on the lifestyles in those countries. So they weren't very attractive markets for Sri Lankan migrants to go in terms of if they have an option. And they said like Middle East, they said Saudi Arabia is like basically a last resort in terms of preferences. Agents said that in this context there's a need for altering people's attitudes and perceptions through positive marketing. The sixth issue that they mentioned in terms of challenge was the fact that there is a lack of capacity of required manpower. The lack of capacity to supply skilled and professional categories was highlighted. It was said that the skills on offer by Sri Lankan migrants do not really match up to the ones that are demanded in destination markets. In this regard, recruitment agencies highlight the need for upskilling of Sri Lankan workers, as well as upgrading the vocational training and technical schools outside of Colombo so that they can produce quality candidates who can not only meet the demand locally but also internationally. The seventh issue, a challenge that they highlighted, was that there was lack of unity amongst agencies operating in the country, and this is not surprising given that there's strict, intense competition amongst them within the industry to get job orders and send people. Although there's an association of foreign employment agencies, many commented that this particular association has become ineffective over the years. And in fact, many of the agencies have opted out from being a member, and it is not currently mandatory to belong to this association. Nevertheless, they emphasize the need for an association and more cooperation within the industry. However, they said that there should be better representation of all the interests of agents in the industry, rather than catering to interests of certain groups within the association. The eighth issue they said was a challenge was the fact that Sri Lanka was increasingly becoming uncompetitive internationally vis-a-vis other labor-sending countries. Moreover, having achieved a middle-income status, Sri Lanka is becoming uncompetitive with other countries in South Asia, where there's a large pool of workers who are willing to work for a lesser salary. In this regard, they emphasize the need to again add value to the product, basically upskilling the workers, as well as capitalizing on the inherent qualities of Sri Lankans, which is their caring nature. They emphasize this aspect as a means of gaining a competitive edge over other countries. The other issue that they highlighted was marketing. They said that there's insufficient marketing, largely due to insufficient the fact that there wasn't enough personnel, time, and resources to carry out promotional activities. They recommended that there should be more exhibition fairs or attend job fairs in foreign countries in this regard, as well as canvassing reputable companies abroad. They also highlighted the need for more cooperation from the Sri Lankan missions abroad in promoting Sri Lanka. The 10th challenge that they highlighted was with regard to documentation. This again goes back to rules and regulation. They said currently there's excessive paperwork required by the Bureau, and they said that this can be simplified, especially the recruitment process, and also upgrading the internet recruitment system that they have. They also highlighted the need for officers abroad in the Sri Lanka missions to be much more aware of the rules and regulations in Sri Lanka as well as those in abroad, and also setting up a telephone help desk in the embassies so that potential employees could get clarification. Looking at the challenges and solutions, what we can say that there are both supply side and demand constraints in accessing markets abroad. The scope for addressing demand side challenges are somewhat limited, as Sri Lanka we are not able to affect changes in other countries. However, there's much more that can be done within Sri Lanka by addressing the supply constraints, which was highlighted in the previous slide, through training, marketing, streamlining recruitment procedures, as well as enhancing cooperation within the industry, not only between agents, between the agents themselves, but between agents and the government as well. Another point that we can take from the interview is that, like, while it's important to look for markets outside of Middle East, Sri Lanka still needs to consolidate its position within the existing traditional markets. More specifically, Sri Lanka needs to better utilize the available opportunities that are there before whilst exploring other regional markets abroad. In terms of the limitations of the study, as I mentioned earlier on, the study adopted a qualitative methodology, so the sampling was purposive, so it's somewhat difficult to generalize the findings to the overall population, because this well, not a sample, but we only interviewed 24 people, so that was the limitation of a study. In terms of future research direction, there's obviously, this can be extended to do a survey amongst employment agencies in Sri Lanka, which can be supplemented with interviews with potential migrants and their returnees in terms of obtaining their points of view in finding out what sort of problems they've faced in accessing markets abroad. And this could also be supported through, again, interviews with foreign employment recruitment agencies abroad, as well as employers abroad, so that we could improve the quality of the findings that we have obtained and triangulate the findings. That brings me to the end of the presentation. As I mentioned, this is a work in progress, and these are the initial findings that we found from the interviews that we have done. And we welcome any suggestions and comments that you would have that could be incorporated into the study, which we hope to bring out sometime around September. Thank you.